Hi everyone, it's Jake. Today we're going to explore 4 ways that we can blend watercolours. Colour blending is a key part of watercolour painting. It's super useful for softening edges and fading from one colour to another. As I go through each technique step by step, feel free to grab a piece of paper and paint along with me. So first up is what I call forced blending. With this technique, we use the brush to force 2 colours together. It's a good tool to understand and it offers the most control over the blend. However, it's to be used sparingly as it can sacrifice some of the spontaneous energy of watercolour. Choose the 2 colours that you'd like to blend together. I've picked a warm yellow and a warm red. Start by mixing up the 2 colours on your palette with a good amount of water in each puddle. We begin blending by painting 2 adjacent squares. No, on the paper. That's better. Make sure to clean your brush each time you change colour. Work quickly so that the paint is still wet when the 2 areas touch, and they will naturally start to blend together. We can now start to encourage the blend by loading the brush with colour again and dragging the paint from one area to the other. You can even change colour and go back the other way to improve the blend. Make sure your brush is moving perpendicular to the direction of the blend and not across the blend like this. A common mistake is to add water between the colours, but this will actually work to separate them. To avoid unintentionally diluting your paints, make sure to blot off any excess water from the brush when changing colours. Also be careful not to dry your brush too much, as this will lift up the paint like a sponge and leave the area looking lighter than the rest. There we have it, a forced blend. These are great for illustrations and detailed work, but if we disturb the paint too much, it can begin to look clinical and overly intentional. Some of the beauty of watercolour is painting in a way that feels natural, effortless, and free-flowing. Now we can achieve this with the next technique called wet in wet. To blend wet in wet, we can first activate the paper with a nice clear wash of water, and then introduce the colours next to each other, just like before. Only this time, we let them blend naturally in the water. Check it out. Now time for a quick cup of tea while we watch this one dry. You can use your brush or gravity to help control these blends. I used this technique in my recent sky painting video. Up next, a variation on the wet in wet blend. This technique's all about blending your second colour into an area of flat wash. To do this, paint your first colour as a wash. Bear in mind this should be more watery than the colour we're going to put on top. Now we apply the second layer and see what happens as it dries. This is my favourite type of blend as it's so useful for creating soft edges. Time for a second cup of tea, I think. Now, another thing to bear in mind is how wet or dry that first layer is, because this will affect how much that second layer spreads out into the blend. I used this technique to add colour and shadow to a lemon in a recent video. The last method I'd like to show you is what I call a dry blend. It's great for softening those notorious hard edges that watercolours are kind of famous for. Simply paint an area, then wash your brush and blot off most of the water. Then use the dryish brush like a sponge to lift the paint. Try lifting the paint and smudging to the side so that it fades away. You might need to repeat the process a few times. This one takes a bit of practice, but is super useful. So, I hope these tips helped you on your quest to understand watercolour just a bit more. Remember, great paintings are full of hard and soft edges. It's this variety that helps the viewer navigate your painting and will also keep their eye interested. Up next in this series, we're going to look at my 5 favourite ways to create texture. As always, thanks for the support, keep up the good work, and I'll see you in the next video.